Hey, so today we're going to be talking about podcast intros and outros. How do you introduce your show? How do you leave it at the end so that you can grow those listeners, persuade them to listen, make them come back next time? That's it, intros and outros. Let's take a look. So I know on the surface, like the main content, that's the core of the show, isn't it? You think that's where people listen, that's where you grab your listeners. But actually, the intro and the outro, particularly the intro, is almost more important. Certainly it's more important to grab those people in and make sure that new listeners listen to the entire episode. Because new listeners, they've got no loyalty to you whatsoever. They don't know what's going on, they don't know you, they've not seen your content before. We discovered in our podcast discoverability survey that 28% of all listeners only give you less than 5 minutes. So that's 1 in 4. 1 in 4 people will give you less than 5 minutes, and the rest don't give you much more. So you need to grab people quickly. And actually, generally, you want to do it quicker than that. You want to do it within the first 10, 20, 30 seconds. But we'll talk a bit more about that later on, really. But that intro needs to do something really important. It needs to make the people think, is this interesting? Is it well made? What am I going to learn here? And finally, people are selfish. We need to think about it that way. People want to know what's in it for me. Why is it worth me listening? Your intro needs to tell them all of that. So here's what we're going to do to make a good intro. We're going to put ourselves in the shoes of our listener, in their earbuds maybe. You want to know what they want to get from the show, okay? So if you know your listener, you've done your planning, you know your podcast, you know what people want, you know what problems they have, what barriers they have. Make sure that every single episode you're planning in solving some kind of problem, giving some kind of benefit to those listeners, and make sure that goes really, really clearly into the intro, okay? So here's a few things you can put into your intro. Here's a few tips on how you make a good intro. And I know there's no solid rules here. You need to make the intro your own because podcasting wouldn't be the great medium it is if everyone sounded exactly the same. So these are just some guidelines, just a few ideas that can guide how you create your intro, okay? But here's a few tips. First of all, there's the stuff that goes into the intro every single time, okay? So that general intro that introduces the show and tells people what it's all about, who it's for, okay? So there's a few things going here. First, tell them your name, okay? You can tell your name really quickly. You can tell the name of the show, all right? The show name should give an idea of what the show's about, should give them a clue at least. So say the show name as well. There might be a tagline. If the show name's really short, you can fit a tagline in there too. Next, tell them who the show is for, okay? So what is the audience? Who is the audience? Give them a really quick, succinct summary of who this show is designed to be listened to by, who it's designed to help, who the audience is. And finally, you can do a little bit around the topic, although sometimes that isn't necessary actually. Sometimes the title and the tagline plus the audience, who it's for, will give enough of an idea around the topic. But sometimes you can put in, 5-10 words, short sentence around the topic, okay? And once you've done that, the most important part really is the episode. This is what's going to make people listen to the episode. You've done the general one. Here's the name of the show. Here's who I am. Here's who it's for, what it does. And then what is this episode going to narrow down into? What problem does this episode solve? What's it designed to help? What solution are you going to offer to the listener? As in, what benefit are you going to give to the listener? What is going to be in it for them? And maybe what's unique about it? What's unique about your approach? I always like that. You've got problem, solution is the key, but really, what's the uniqueness? Why is it worth listening to your take on this as opposed to anyone else's, okay? And you can do that quickly. You can do that in a short, bit of audio. You can introduce the show in just 10, 15 seconds, your name, the title, the topic, the audience, and then go into what is going to be in this episode, 20, 30, 40 seconds right at the start of the show. So going a little bit deeper on that problem that really draws people in, it's nice to talk about that subject matter, like what the topic is for this episode, but really relating a problem that your listener identifies with. That's what really draws people in. So take our show Podcraft, for example. Podcraft is all about how to podcast, how to create a successful podcast. And we've got loads of things that we cover in there, as you probably know, as a podcaster. So like take one of the most common ones we're asked is, how do you upload a podcast to iTunes? And of course, you probably know, you don't actually upload it to iTunes, you upload it to your hosting and then you submit it to iTunes via the directory, blah, blah, blah. There's loads of other ways. It's not even iTunes these days, it's Apple Podcasts as well. So we have all of these things to cover within that question, okay? So what we do is we talk about the problem. We mention at the very start of the episode a question that the listener will relate to. So something like, hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Podcraft. This is the show all about podcasting, from launch to monetization and anything in between. And it's for anyone who wants to start a successful show. On this episode though, have you ever wondered how to upload a podcast to iTunes? Well, we're going to show you how to do that on this episode. I'm going to show you why it's not even iTunes anymore, it's Apple Podcasts, why you don't even upload to iTunes or Apple Podcasts, you upload elsewhere. But if you want to know where to put it to make sure you can get your show online, then follow along this episode. By the end of it, you'll be able to upload your show. No worries, get out to the public and get your voice out into the world. I'm Colin Gray, joined by Matthew McLean as always. Let's get into it. Okay, so I was kind of cobbled together. I could probably do that better, but you get the framework. You say a question which draws people in. It really identifies with them. They think, oh, I've got that question. And then you answer that question. You tell them how you're going to answer it. So the framework is something around, hey folks, this is the something podcast, which is about this topic for these type of people. This time around, have you ever wondered how to something? Well, this time we're going to cover all of that, and by the end of it, you're going to be able to do X, Y, Z really easily. Okay, a framework just like that. We'll copy that into the description below if you want to have a read through it, so you can see it with the gaps in as well. There's a wee template there for you. So I hope that gives you an idea. That's what I would tend to cover in an intro. And you want to do that quickly. You want to do that within the first 30 to 60 seconds, Take 1 minute at most really to introduce the show, tell people what they're going to get from it, and really make them stick around. So cold opens are really interesting. To get an idea of what they are, have you ever watched a show on Netflix? You sit down on the couch before you've even opened your Doritos, the episode started, you're into the story, it's all going. And only 5 minutes later, the generic theme music, the generic intro kicks in. It's only way into the show. That's a cold open. The equivalent on a podcast is something like you press play and immediately somebody says, well, it was at that point I decided to put on a suit of sirloin steaks and jump in and start swimming with some sharks. And you're like, well, what is that all about? What's this story? I need to actually find out why this idiot is still alive to tell the tale. That's the whole point. It generates some intrigue. It almost generates a little bit of confusion, but not in a negative way. It kind of tells about the story, but you're like, where does that come from? How does that fit into the rest of it? It's curiosity. It opens a loop. It asks that question that people want to stick around and find the answer for. So that's what a cold open is. You have that 30 seconds, a minute, maybe even only 10 or 5 at the very start. And then you have your intro to the show. So we've got an excellent article on this written by one of our writers, Steph, all about cold opens, including a whole bunch of examples. So we'll put a link to that in the description below if you want to read more about cold opens, how you might want to use them. Okay, we've covered loads around the intro, the start of the podcast, but what about that outro? The outro really can make all the difference between somebody getting to the end of your show and then thinking about listening to another episode, or making sure they've hit the subscribe button. Maybe they're just testing it out. That outro is where you can really encourage them to engage and get something more from that listener, turn them from a casual visitor into a loyal subscriber, okay? So that outro is really important. I mean, if they've got to the end of the episode, they've probably enjoyed it, presumably. So there's your chance to actually ask something of the listener at that point, okay? So in that outro, there's a few things you can think about. Here's a few things you can add in. Again, there's no solid rules. There's no real structure you have to stick to. So just pick and choose a few of these and follow these kind of guides to make for a good outro. So first of all, thank them for listening. There's millions of podcasts out there. They chose yours to spend half an hour with. Thank them for that. Next, point them towards the show notes, all right? Give them a link to visit for more resources, for a list of what you talked about, for any information that they can revise around what you've just talked about. Show notes, always really useful. Next, if you can, if you're planning ahead, then give them a teaser of what's on the next episode. That can make a huge difference. If you can tell them a little bit about the problem you're going to help them solve on the next episode, they're way more likely to, come back and remember to come back to your show next time. And that builds that loyal habit of listening. And then give them that call to action, okay? Like I said, you can ask them something at this point. You've earned that right because they've given them that whole episode of content. You've given them a ton of value, a ton of entertainment. You can ask something of them at this point, all right? The key thing here though is to keep it simple. Just ask for one thing, only send them to one place, okay? So many podcasters make the mistake of saying, right, so give us a rating and a review on iTunes, go to Twitter and give us a bit of feedback there, then send us an email about this, and then go to the website and sign up for that. And as soon as you give more than one, two at the most things, people just do nothing. They don't remember any of it. With podcasting, because people can be out and about, they can be going off and doing something else, it's kind of a background, not a background, it's a medium where you can be doing something in the background. They're not necessarily at their desks with the computer, not necessarily on their phones, they might be driving, so you need to hammer this home to them, okay? Sometimes it takes 2-3 episodes to get somebody to do something, and therefore you need to keep it simple. You need to do one thing and hammer that home over 2, 3, 4 episodes. So choose one call to action, okay? For 4 episodes, maybe you say, right, we'd love some ratings and reviews in Apple Podcasts or in Spotify. That's your call to action, your one call to action for 4 episodes. Maybe it's give us some feedback. Get on Twitter and send us a feedback to this question and be specific. Give them an actual question to answer, okay? The more specific you get, the easier it is for your listeners to actually respond to it, all right? Maybe it is something around sales, send them to your website and say, right, for the next 4 weeks, we're going to say, we've got this offer running on our bags that we sell on our website. Go to the website, pick up the discount code here and go and buy something. The key part being, choose one thing and send them to one place, okay? And that is it. So I'm often asked about pre-recorded intros and outros. Either you could pre-record something, put it over some nice music, produce it nicely so that you've got this clip that always says the same thing every single time, or you could pay somebody else to do it. There's loads of services out there. Description will show you some links towards them. There's loads of services out there you can pay to create you a really professional, radio style intro or outro. The key thing with these is, yes, they are fine, they're good. Sometimes it's a good thing to have that preset intro. It can save you a bit of time doing it at the start, perhaps. It can sound really polished, it can sound really professional, but they need to be short, okay? Too many people get a 30-second or even longer intro recorded that sounds exactly the same every single time. There's 30 seconds, even a minute, that's exactly the same every single episode. And what does that mean? All that means is your listeners are going to be hitting that skip button every single time. They're just going to skip past it. They're just going to ignore it. And they're going to become blind to it. They might even not hit skip. They might hit skip to the next the next podcast because they're just bored of hearing this thing every single time. All right? So if you get an intro made, make sure it's only 10, 15 seconds at most. That can be a nice little bit of polish that's not so boring every time, not so repetitive that it's really skippable. I would argue that actually in most cases, you're better just doing it yourself every single time. If you have a good, concise intro, like we do for Podcraft every time. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Podcraft. This is the show all about podcasting from launch to monetization and everything in between. I'm Colin Gray, joined by Matthew McLean, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's 15, 20 seconds at the start of your podcast every time. It doesn't take long. You put the music over it when you edit it anyway, or you use Alitu and add the music under that automatically, then it's easy, okay? But some people do like that pre-recorded intro, sounds really pro, you can get a different voiceover. It's up to you. Just make sure if you do that, whether it's the podcast intro, the outro, keep it short. Otherwise, people are going to be skipping past the whole thing. Quick one on producers for podcast intros and outros. You can get them produced, like I said, externally. You could make them yourself, but it can sound really cool if you get a professional producer to do it. My favourite is Mike and Isabella from Music Radio Creative. We've known them for years. I had a Podcraft intro made by them years back, actually. Still have it on our old episode if you look back at some of the early seasons. Sounds cool. And you can get them to make it nice and short, nice and concise. You can get a voiceover if you want it. So if you do want to have that externally produced, they're a good one to go with. It is an affiliate link with them. We do get a small commission. It doesn't cost you any extra, but just supports this content that we do. The other links down here are affiliate links too, by which I mean the Fiverr ones. So Fiverr is another marketplace where you can get freelancers to produce stuff like that for you. Fiverr is a bit of a minefield in some ways. There's some pretty poor ones, but actually there's a few good ones as well. And we've listed a few of our favorites in the description below. You'll find some links there to 2 or 3 that we've tried out who can make some good intros. So if you do want to get it externally made, go and check them out. You'll see all those links below. So I hope that's given you a good guide on what to include in a good podcast intro and a good podcast outro. Without being too restrictive. I hope it hasn't come across too restrictive because, like I said at the start, that intro, that outro, they need to be you. They need to be yours. They need to be your style, your voice, fit in with your topic, your show, the way you do things. But I hope those have given you some good guidelines around some rules of thumb, from length to what to include to how to hook your listeners in. That is the key thing, really. The intro needs to hook your listeners in. It needs to persuade them to listen to the entire show. If you can't hook them in those first 20, 30 seconds, you might not have them for the rest of the episode. And in that outro, the job there is to be really focused on one thing you want to ask from your listener and to encourage them to listen to the next episode if you can, okay? If you can do that, you'll start to grow your audience over time. You'll have listeners that are more loyal. They'll come back again and again. More of those casual listeners will become loyal listeners, and you'll grow your audience over time. If you found this useful, of course, please do hit that subscribe button and the little alert bell so that YouTube will tell you every time we have one of our new weekly videos up. And of course, all the resources in the description below. If you want to find out anything that I've talked about, just look down there. You should find links. So I hope that's been helpful. Hope you get a great podcast intro and outro out of this afterwards, and I'll talk to you on the next video. Okay.